area. Okay. Yeah. Wait. Come on.
Yeah, you looking at first question analyze it. Sorry, one smile.
Sri Lanka. Just to give you a background, the combat against terrorism in Sri Lanka. When the war ended, on the same day, very same day, 17 tabled resolution in this very council. However, this special council meeting, which took place on the 26th September, at that the other countries, the majority of the countries, opposed that resolution, instead passed a new resolution commending Sri Lanka for ending the war. Basically, they said Sri Lankan forces saved the Tamils and the Sinhalese and the Muslims from the clutches of terrorism and commended that effort. So the first resolution that was passed at UNHRC was one that was supporting what happened in Sri Lanka. But then, after that, Mr. Ban Ki-moon visited Sri Lanka 2-3 days later, came back and appointed a special committee led by Mr. Darusman to do a study on Sri Lanka and give a report, basically for his private edification. That was not a panel approved by the Security Council or by the UNHRC. This panel submitted a report which had some serious flaws according to our understanding. However, it was never tabled at the council. But based on that, subsequently, 2012, 3 years later, another resolution was brought in. Seemingly an innocent resolution which requested again investigate what happened during the last phase of the war, and that passed. Then in 2013, another resolution came which had a little bit more requirements in that, like looking into the devolution of Sri Lanka, etc. More political angle. And the third one, 2014, a very lengthy resolution was passed, which is called 25/1, which in fact had a lot of interference into Sri Lanka's sovereignty. They spoke about not only the need of looking at what happened during the war, but about devolution and various other aspects. This resolution 25/1 authorized the Human Rights Commissioner to carry out his own investigation on Sri Lanka, which was done, and the report was tabled in September 2015, almost 1.5 years later. And in that, it was pointed out that there were certain war crimes took place in Sri Lanka, and that impression was created. Based on that, resolution 30/1 was passed in the Human Rights Council. Now here is the issue. The concern is the resolution 30/1 was based on OSIM report, which was produced by the Office of the High Commissioner, which had some serious flaws. Firstly, it had a lot of information which did not have credible sources. And if you read through the report, it itself admits that they didn't have sufficient sources to justify what they were saying. Secondly, in this particular report, there was a twist on the issue, because when the resolution 25/ was authorized, this investigation, the term that was used to define Sri Lanka's situation was combating terrorism. But when the report came, the combating terrorism had disappeared. Instead, it was defined as an internal armed struggle. You know the difference. There's a significant difference between combating terrorism and an internal armed struggle. And also, LTT was a terrorist organization which was banned by 32 member countries. However, when the OSLI report came, the word terrorism was completely missing. Instead, LTT was defined as a non-state armed group. You know, there's again a huge difference between a terrorist group and a non-state armed group. So we see this as some kind of a deliberate effort to mislead the Human Rights Council. because the resolution 30/1 came into existence based on the OSLA report, which has ignored two key factors. One is what happened there was a battle against terrorism. Second one was LTT was a terrorist group. So what we are now saying is, if you want justice for victims of terrorism all over the world, it must be the same. So therefore, even though LTT is dead and gone, the people who finance LTT must be investigated. And the Human Rights Council has completely missed that point. It is time that UNHRC seriously look into this terrorist financing, because the real financiers are still at large. They are not only around, they are involved even within UNHRC sessions, now pretending to be human rights champions. So that's my brief, and let me hand it over to Professor.
Document here, 30/1, it is basically coming with internal armed conflict. Now, purposely or intentionally, what they have done, they have actually transferred the combatant terrorism to internal armed conflict. Even internal armed conflict, they applied IHL, International Humanitarian Law, Geneva Convention 4. Geneva Convention 4 specifically says, even an internal armed conflict, if the group is keeping innocent civilian as a human shield for several months, the state has a responsibility. State obligation is there for what to rescue them. That's why the government forces tried several times and they rescued. 285,000 innocent civilians were actually kept as hostage. So Sri Lanka actually what they did, they rescued. When 285,000 started crossing, who fired them first? Who actually went with human bombs? This is LTT. Now final 285,000 rescued. So in that case, so it is very clear. Even this done according to IHL, LTT has fully violated that. So my argument is this. Before that, the top convention is suppression of terrorism. It is we are very clear given 1999 International Convention for the Suppression of the Finance of Terrorism. Now, why we have ignored this? When you are financing terrorists, then you must incorporate that. Where? In your own resolution. But the top and the highest one, they have basically ignored. Why they have ignored it? And this is where if you come IHL, there is a time limit, there is a territory limit. But here, the financial is the most important part. And United Nations, they have their global counter terrorism strategy. So our argument is this. There is a procedural error. There is a technical error when drafting 30/1, because the most important part, financial terrorism, that is combating terrorism, totally ignored. So this is the biased one. Still Sri Lanka having a chance. So UNHRC must clearly see to intervene in this and come up with a counter resolution, because we have up to next year 2019 March, so they have given 2 years. So this is the way. And the other thing, already United in this USA left, and this is a co-sponsor is not still there. When you are appointing a co-sponsor, these can be considered and come with a fresh counter resolution. If 31 passed, it is actually in the process, but the issue is not that. The top and the highest one is financial terrorism globally noted. This is not a problem for Sri Lanka only, this is a problem for all the countries. So you must come up with the global strategy to curb terrorism, because those who funded terrorists from before 2002, even people still they are living. So they are assisting, abating, supporting for terrorism. No action had been taken. So you have to consider that specifically. That's why our argument, UNHRC must intervene. Still you have a time bar, so you can intervene and see what action you can see for the financing terrorism.
And I just had a quick look at the documentation here. So in the part 1, if you go to page 13, I have a question. Because you say in the documentation that they seem that some Western countries continue to try to use the UN machinery to build a case against Sri Lanka. So basically my question is, can you elaborate a little bit on that, and can you name those countries, and what are they trying to achieve through that, according to you? Thank you.
See, LTT had a huge financial network around the world. When the war ended, they were generating something like 400 million US dollars a year. And that was used for arms procurement. When the war ended, the funding kept coming because they had a huge network, some legal businesses, some illegal businesses, and also extortion of money from diaspora all over the world. So money kept coming. And few individuals who were in the original international network survived. It was only the people who were in the military people who were in Sri Lanka died. So these people could use that money to lobby politicians, lobby organizations, lobby international institutions, and that's a huge amount of money that they could spare for this purpose. So we believe that is what, perhaps, I use the word perhaps, influenced some of the politicians in the Western countries to talk on behalf of LTT even after LTT was defeated. That is why the very same day the war was ended, 17 countries want to bring a resolution talking about investigation. Our question is this: the war was there for 30 years. Thousands of people were killed. Thousands of civilians were killed in the most brutal manner. This is the terrorist organization which introduced suicide bombers to the world. This is the terrorist organization, the only terrorist organization in the world, which killed 2 world leaders, 2 national leaders. And nobody spoke about human rights at that time. No country came, no senior person visited. Suddenly, when LTT was defeated, sudden interest on Sri Lanka. So that is questionable. Then, as I mentioned earlier, the first resolution that was passed in this esteemed council was in favor of Sri Lanka. They commended Sri Lanka for ending the war. Yet, Sri Lanka was not left alone. The process continued, looking for a reason, looking for an excuse. And they got a report, which is called Darusman report, which had so many flaws. For example, a classic example I'll give you, in that it says 40,000 civilians died during the last phase of the war. That is impossible, because even United Nations representatives there in 2009 have written that the maximum civil deaths during the war would have been something like 2,000 to 3,000. Our census and statistics confirm that. American embassy at that time had written, it is available by WikiLeaks, that it is around 2,000 to 3,000. Suddenly this number has gone up to 40,000. From where did they get that number? They got it from a media channel called Channel 4. But Channel 4 carries a documentary saying 40,000 people died, and it goes into a UN document. And when the final investigation, proper investigation was done, OISL report, that carries the same number, which is impossible. So that is why we say there's some kind of conspiracy. Why was this combating terrorism term removed, which was originally there in the 25th resolution? You're authorized to investigate a situation of combating terrorism, but when the report comes, it suddenly becomes internal armed struggle. How come terrorists become non-state armed group? So there was a manipulation. We clearly see the manipulation. We don't know who's behind, but we can think that is because the ability of lobbying by the Tamil extreme LTT Tamil diaspora who was supporting the ILA. Another thing I want to clarify very clearly, 2 things I want to mention here. We as Sri Lankans, we have nothing against Tamils. Tamils have lived in Sri Lanka for a very long period. Sinhalese even longer. Then the Muslims, the Malays, Burghers. Anybody who is living in Sri Lanka, a citizen has the same rights. They can live anywhere. There's no discrimination. So our problem is terrorists. There's a small group of terrorists from within the Tamil community who brutalized the country for 30 years. We are against them. We are against terrorism, just like UN is against terrorism. That is the reason. Second thing, when this OISL report came, it speaks about certain allegations, certain questionable situations. We don't defend them. We are citizens. We don't defend them. We say, please go and investigate. But use the justice system available in Sri Lanka, because the legal system in Sri Lanka is almost 100 years old. And we have prosecuted. We have enough soldiers, military officers in the past, and verdicts have been given, sometimes against them. So we are quite capable of doing that. You don't need an international expert to come and do that. But this resolution suggests foreign judges. Why? That means you don't trust Sri Lanka's justice system? No, these are all manipulation. And this resolution which came from this whole case had 20 clauses. Only one refers to LTT. All others refers to one, whatever they say, committed by Sri Lankan armed forces, and more than that on political issues. They talk about devolution. What has devolution got to do with humanitarian law? That is all because this is a political memo. People who wanted a separate state within Sri Lanka couldn't get it through an armed struggle. Now they are using money left with them to do that through other means. So we just request this esteemed organization don't fall into that trap.
Can I add, now you directly asked, what are the countries you can name? When the LTT was blacklisted, banned, there are several countries, they are collecting the funds, international, transnational, LTT government is there in Denmark. This is where run by all these who escaped and those who are hiding in other countries, they don't want to come back to Sri Lanka once a week. So Netherlands, one country. Specifically, there are certain schools, they run as schools, but they collect that money. So don't forget one thing. Transnational LTT government is existing, but it has been banned. Even that ban, where is the UN Global Anti-Terrorism Financial Suppression Convention? Are they coming up with that? No. I have seen my own eyes when I went to Canada after the war. There are certain places they are collecting as, certain places they collect. So why they are collecting this? Still, they want to buy arms. So the West basically must see it very, very clearly. When a thing has happened in Sri Lanka, and also the investigation, it's not carried out. The IOSL investigation, they never visited Sri Lanka soil. This was carried out in Thailand. I'll give the names. Thailand and other countries they carried out. All these evidence were given by whom? All these people are in Tamil diaspora, those who are living in other countries. No, not a single evidence is clear. So how can you explain an independent investigation? Even Sri Lanka government kept silent. That is the basic issue here. The new government, they kept silent in this issue. So therefore, even today, I challenge you, they are collecting enormous funds in the Gulf region, in the West, if you want, I can name. So what the countries are doing? So openly they say, UK, USA, they openly say that. But the issue is not that they are, once again supporting. Now in Sri Lanka, if there is a discrimination, nothing like that. Even top post government, even the opposition leader of Sri Lanka is a Tamil one. So where we have done the discrimination, but they want to market this, because they use this war as a defense and hiding in several countries. So after the war ended, most of the cases withdrawn from those countries. So they want to show this and they want to market this, and once again they are trying to collect. So that is the countries I need.
Ya, dulu mungkin ya first question analyze.
Thank you for your speech. What I would like to say is that there's an international wrongful act of Human Rights Council Resolution 30/A, an international wrongful act of Sri Lanka government for not defining LTT as a terrorist in the resolution, and Sri Lanka government accepting this. And when there are crimes against humanity as written in the OSCE report, I can say that I will come to the details, but the thing is that Sri Lanka government can go to United Nations Security Council against Human Rights Council 30/A as a threat to peace and security, and there is a dispute between Sri Lanka government and the United Nations Human Rights Council Resolution 30/A, and Sri Lanka government can go to International Court of Justice for a binding decision against Human Rights Council Resolution 30/A. If not this government, the next government or another government, after 10 years, has a right to oppose and do not have any obligation, even it is co-sponsored for the Resolution 30/A, to fulfill. And not only Sri Lanka, any country other than Sri Lanka has a right to take the Human Rights Council Resolution 30/A to the UN Security Council or the International Court of Justice as the hierarchy of the law. The thing is that in the system of United Nations of the world, there is no definition of terrorism, but the problem is focused on who has got a right to use force. This is the problem, why there is no definition as counter force. But there is a common understanding from the Geneva Conventions and Rome Statute Article 8, the acts of terrorism are well defined. And as international humanitarian law does not provide a definition, but the acts committed in armed conflict that will commonly be considered as terrorism. In the OECD report, all the crimes against the civilians are under the war crimes and crimes against humanity, they are well defined. But even Resolution 35/M, when the situation defined as combat terrorism in the OECD report, it's not defined as a combat terrorism. This is the first international wrongful act of the OECD report because they don't have an authority to change the definition of the armed conflict because the mandate of the High Commissioner is under that. So this is the first international wrongful act. And the second international wrongful act of the OECD report is that they use international humanitarian law. International humanitarian law is limited with the territory and the time. When the conflict finishes, that is the violence, international humanitarian law stops and the territory stops. But in the UN Global Counterterrorism Strategy, when there is the acts of terrorism, the territories of the world is including the finance of terrorism, which is an obligation to open an international committee of inquiry for the finance of terrorism. And there's another sad story. The thing is that when you go on UN Global Counterterrorism Strategy, is written in 2014 in the CIA fact sheet that LTT is still living and collecting funds. What means is that when you do not open a committee of inquiry for the finance of terrorism and use international humanitarian law, you put trash to the UN Global Counterterrorism Strategy and open the new terrorism. And you give impunity, which is forbidden in the UN system, for the acts of terrorism. And impunity is forbidden. Let me tell you something. The Statute of International Court of Justice, Article 38, says that source of law, how International Court of Justice, within hierarchy, will make the decision. And this is the same point for the Human Rights Council 2006 mandate. And they are under the obligation to use the UN global system. And I will return a decision of UN Security Council, Resolution 1315 of 2000 on Sierra Leone. And it's an obligation to end impunity. For whom? But when you use international humanitarian law, you close the territory with the island. And you leave outside perpetrators of the financing of terrorism, which is a crime and which is a threat to world peace and security. Two things happen. Even though all the warlords of LTT died, you give impunity to them, not defining LTT as terrorists. Any other terrorist organization in the world can say that, hey, look, LTT is not defined as terrorist, and I will not be defined as terrorist. This is the reason it's a threat to world peace and security, and any government can take the subject to the UN Security Council or to the International Court of Justice, because there is another thing. Why I say that any country, and including Sri Lanka, does not has an obligation to fulfill the Resolution 30/1 because there's a decision of International Court of Justice. Let me tell the decision. The decision is legal consequences of the construction of a wall in the occupied Palestinian theory. But this is the important part is that they say that obligation not to recognize as lawful for the case of the occupied territory because it is a breach of Jurkogan's law and it gives ergo omnes responsibility to the international community as a whole not to recognize as lawful. And this is the same case for the Human Rights Council Resolution 30/1. International community and Sri Lanka government has an obligation not to recognize as legal. And Sri Lanka government, by co-sponsor, make an international wrongful act, and there is no obligation to fulfill his co-sponsorship unless LTT is defined as terrorist, and International Committee of Inquiry for the perpetrators of financing of terrorism is opened by the UN Human Rights Council. This is what I am to say, and what I say is that what we need is that, the last thing I will say, an ambassador can enter UN Security Council with the political point of view of his country, because it is codified in the UN Charter. But the same ambassador, when goes to Human Rights Council, he is not a political person. This ambassador is under the mandate of General Assembly Resolution 60/L.48, that is 6/251, the mandate of Human Rights Council. They are under obligation to fulfill the mandate, and their impunity is forbidden, and it must use the victim-based approach. And there is a question: what are the rights of the victims of terrorism? Who will search for the justice for the victims of terrorism that Human Rights Council Resolution 30/1 has given? So, last words I will say again. Human Rights Council Resolution 30/1 is a threat to world peace and security. Any country other than Sri Lanka also can take the case to the UN Security Council as a threat to world peace and security. There is a dispute in the UN system because UN Human Rights Council, by its Resolution 30/1, make a rebellion in the UN system and did not fulfill his obligations, and can go to International Court of Justice for a binding decision against the Resolution 30/1. And let me say, this is a shame in the history of UN Human Rights Council to create such a resolution. Thank you very much.